Okay, now that we have done all three methods of solving systems of equations, graphing, substitution, elimination, we're going to talk about making decisions about what you would do to solve different systems. Because ultimately, there will be some questions where I say solve using this method, but there may be some where I say solve using whatever method you want. So how do you decide what method is going to be best for you? Okay. So for these, I think I mentioned before, graphing usually isn't one that we kind of just jump right into. Okay. The only time we would use graphing really, if we had a choice to, is if we had that graphing technology, whether it's a Desmos or a graphing calculator, something that will do the graphing for us, and we can quickly see where things intersect, especially because we don't know if they're going to intersect at a nice spot. We don't know how easy it is to graph. We may not have graph paper available, so usually I'm not going to say graphing is what we're going to do here. So really it's going to come down to, do we use substitution or do we use elimination? Okay, and remember substitution, okay, we look for those coefficients of 1 or -1. Okay, doesn't always have to happen that way. I mean, sometimes if everything is even, we could divide by a 2, and it's still okay. But usually I'm looking for those coefficients of 1 or -1 if I'm using substitution. If not, I usually jump to elimination, but remember, we might need to manipulate our equations a little bit before we actually use that elimination. Okay, so for each of these, there could be multiple answers of what we could do here. Okay, and I'm not saying one is necessarily better than the other, but if there's a couple that jump out at me, I'll make sure to mention all the methods that would work here. So number one, I don't see any x equals or y equals or even coefficients of 1 or -1. I'm thinking substitution, not the best thing here. But what I do notice is that my 3x and my -3x are opposites. So this would be a great time to use elimination, where we would add our equations together. Okay, and we would eliminate the x's, which would allow, we're not going to actually go through and solve all of these, okay, or any of these, I should say. We're just going to say what would be the best thing to do here. So here we would add our equations together, eliminate those x's, okay, and solve for y. And then once you solve for y, you can plug it in and find your x. So definitely here, elimination is the best thing because I see those opposites. Number two, I have x equals 4y plus 3. And I see that x equals a number, and this is a prime candidate for substitution. So I would take this stuff that x equals, and I would substitute it in for the x in the other equation. So I would say for this one, substitution probably your best option because it has that x equals right there. Okay. Number three, we have 4x plus 2y equals 9, 7x plus 2y equals 40. Okay, I don't have x equals or y equals or coefficients of 1 or -1. And in this case, I do have 2y in each of my things. And we said there's multiple ways we can do this question. Okay, what I would probably do is change the signs in one of my equations. I'll say change sign in one equation, abbreviate, which would make this now a -2y. And so in that case, I'll just do this. So -4x minus 2y equals -9. And then we would have 7x plus 2y equals 40. And the reason I did that is now my things are opposites, and I would add my equations, and then I would eliminate those y's. Okay, you could also say subtract from the original ones that we had, but that's harder. Okay, so I try not to do that if I can. I like to add when possible. So I am definitely a fan of make one of them be negative so that we can add our two equations together. This one, number 4, we got multiple options here. So we have 8x minus y equals 10, -3x plus 4y equals 12. I don't have x equals or y equals. So option 1, though, I do see this negative y. So option one, we'll say number one, we could get y by itself and use substitution. Okay. We do have to be careful because there's a negative y, so we will have that extra step to get rid of that -1 coefficient, but we could totally get y by itself and substitute it into the other equation. Option number two, if you want to use elimination, we can multiply the first equation by a number so that our y's will match. So we can multiply the first equation by 4. Okay, we can then add our equations together because it would be a -4y and a +4y, and we would eliminate our y's here. So either of those options. We could also, multiply the first equation by 3 and the second one by 8 if we really wanted to eliminate our x's. But that involves multiplying twice and our numbers get a little bit large, but it's a possibility if we wanted to. Okay. Jumping up to number 5. Here, I don't see any x's, x equals or y equals. I don't see any numbers matching. 3 doesn't go into 5, 5 doesn't go to 3. Same thing with 4 and 7. This is one where we're going to have to use elimination, but we're multiplying both of our equations first before we can actually use elimination. And it's your choice if you want to eliminate your x's or your y's. Okay. I do like the fact that my y's have different signs. So I would probably say, let's do this first one by 7 and the second one by 4. Okay. And then use elimination. Okay. Or you could have also done, the first one by 5 and the second one by 3, or 5 and -3, and eliminate your x's. But definitely elimination. And it's one where you have to do multiplying twice in order to make things become how you want them. And then number 6, we have x minus 2y. And I don't have x by itself, but this once again is one where I could very easily get that x by itself. So option number 1, I'm going to say get x alone and substitute. Or option 2, we could multiply the first equation either by 3 or by -3, depending on what you wanted to eliminate. I'm going to be a little bit more general on this one. So multiply your first equation to eliminate x's or y's, because either way, depending on which number you use, 3 or -3, one of them would be eliminated. Okay, so hopefully this gives you an idea of, what's the best thing to do in different situations, but ultimately it's up to you. You could technically use elimination for every single question if I gave you a choice, if you wanted to. You could use substitution for everything if you wanted to, but then you might be plugging in fractions and ew, that's kind of gross. But yeah, coefficients of 1 or -1 for substitution. Usually everything else, elimination is probably your way to go.